Hello there, and we're back. So thank you so much for staying with us. And what a great day it's been so far. We've had so much energy, so much information, really a lot of engagement, and some great speakers really sharing their attitudes with us, sharing their best practice and sharing their great experience, and some wonderful, refreshing and very pragmatic tips for what we can do for the future and how do we really prepare to move forward. Now, I have the opportunity to spend the next 30 minutes with a wonderful lady who we're going to get a little up close and personal here. Shanta Eaden joins me now, and she is the CEO of Ally Energy. So Shanta, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, it's an honor.
Now, talk to me a little bit about our energy, and the title of this is, making sure we hold on to that spark, because if anything we need in this industry, we need energy. We really, really do. And we need energy in our professional life. We need it in our private life, but we also need to be effective and we need to be engaged. Now, at the same time, though, we also have to, and you're a great believer, I believe, to protect that energy. Tell me just a little bit about that.
Yeah, I believe in protecting our energy because it has so much weight in how we show up from day to day. And so it's our energy, and we should be able to decide how we give it and who and how we use it. And so it's really important that we, as individuals, protect our energy. And then we'll talk a little bit about what organizations can do as well to help their employees.
Now, there is, in the Harvard Business Review not too long ago, a gentleman called Tony Schwartz, and he is the president and CEO of the Energy Project. Now, he talks about manage your energy, not your time. I'm not going to give him total credit for this, because I think lots of people have thought about this in the past, and people have really, stood back and, maybe put attention in what we do. Now, this, I believe, is something, that you would definitely advocate. But talk to me, you read this article too, in terms of what did you take away from it?
I did. And I thought it was a great article and really aligned well with what I believe as well. I mean, I think the first thing is just the responsibility of us taking on how we dispense our energy and how we protect our energy. The second thing is really about how do we create the time and the space that's needed for us to be able to do that and make those decisions around it. And those things are all practical. And if I think about just my experience and keeping the spark, when you think about career change, because I actually came from the banking industry into oil and gas. And that transition from one industry to the next required me to really think about how do I really want to use my energy and give myself out to the world and to organizations. I will also say just the pandemic in general. I mean, going through the pandemic and having to balance, quote unquote, work and life all at the same time requires us to balance that energy. And so he gave some really practical tips about, making sure that we're defining what our energy is, taking the responsibility to protect it by making choices, and then also some tips about just taking the time out to do what is needed to be able to protect that energy.
Yeah, I got to read it in more in depth. But, when we look at it, sort of an energy deficit, I mean, it can happen. It's real. And in our last panel, we were talking about resilience versus overworking. It's not really what we should be doing in many ways. It doesn't do anybody any favors. But again, where do we see the triggers? How do we watch out for that energy deficit?
Well, it starts first from just self-awareness, understanding where you are and how you show up as your best self. And so when those triggers do happen, that you have a plan in place to be able to take time to reset and renew yourself. So in the event, for me, I'm an introvert, so my energy comes from isolation. And so when I spend a lot of time with the different events, meetings, and activities, I have to plan to be able to really recharge myself with, even if it's just 30 minutes of meditation and quietness. And so that, again, everybody's energy is different. So how you recharge and how you keep that spark and reset may be completely different than mine, but that's my experience.
Talk a little bit about resilient for us in terms of, what we just did sort of talk about. Resilience is not being able to overwork and work yourself to death. That's not what resilience is about, is it?
No, it's not. I think again, it's all a personal choice and personal experiences that help us define what resilience means to us. But it really means to keep going, to keep showing up strong, to keep being able to be there, not just for your organization, but for your family and the world, and overcoming those obstacles. But we can't do that at the expense of our energy and our self care and our mindfulness. And so we want to make sure again that we're just really attuned to the things that we need to be our best self. And that's part of what protecting our energy means. It may be not a no sometimes. Maybe it's I can do this for you later, right? And just really embracing that choice to be able to protect your energy.
Now, I mean, in companies around the world, one would hope that the best leaders are in place and that the best people are in the right jobs. And we look particularly at oil and gas too. I mean, not every engineer might make the best leader, but sometimes that's just the natural progression of work here. So how important is it, that we have the right people, the right line managers, the right middle management, the right leaders in place? And what difference does that make to people?
Oh, it makes a huge difference because think about the people leaders, the people who are leading people, can have a huge effect on the culture and how the workplace experience is. And so I like to say, and I get this from a culture session I went to before, that it's the shadow of the leader. And so you really have to think about what shadow you're casting for your teams. And honestly, you can apply that even in your personal life. So if you are positive, if you're optimistic, if your energy is up, if you're forward thinking at the top of you hold yourself personally accountable for those behaviors, then your team is very likely to follow suit with that. And that brings really everybody up on what we call the mood elevator and working towards the right thing and then being able to show up for the organizations.
So there's no day off for the leader in that sense, is there? I mean,
Unfortunately,
hear on
no.
one side that everybody wants to be transparent and everybody, wants to be a bit vulnerable and all of that. But at the same time, it's sort of tough being a leader out there these days, I think.
It is, and it's why as leaders we have to really pay attention to this because if we've been triggered because we're not taking care of ourselves because we're running and blowing and going, then that affects our team and the individuals and how they show up. And think about, if you're an employee and your leader is his energy level, he or she's energy level isn't up, that could affect even how you show up at home because you've had a bad day. And so it is all interconnected. Who we are and how we show up is all interconnected.
Now, talk to me about, I think, this openness, this new era, I suppose, of openness, whereby the CEO is basically saying, anybody can come talk to me. We want all your diverse ideas. This is what's going to make us great. Where does the role of middle management and line managers fit within this? And are they often feeling a little threatened because the doors have been opened in this, sort of new inclusive world?
I think that middle managers actually have a great opportunity here to really learn from those CEOs that are and those leaders that are being more transparent to say this is the type of leader that I want to be. And so if those middle managers or people managers are effective, they're enriching their culture, they're fostering inclusiveness within their teams, then who cares if they have a skip level, right? Or, are able to talk to the leaders of the organization. This is quite different. And I would say, especially in the energy sector, just because of my experience coming into the energy sector, but I think this openness and this transparency is going to be really great for the workforce because it fosters ideas, it fosters authenticity for those employees, and for the innovation so that the innovation can occur.
Yeah, and I think it is, when you look at innovation too, it's absolutely essential, but it also puts, I think, some stress on people because years ago, I think it was easy to get a job. You could train to be an engineer and you probably got a job as an engineer. Now I think there's a lot of pressure on people on both sides, for the employer and the employee. They've got to look wider and perhaps, the engineer has to be a little more open in terms of, somebody has even said that the concept of STEM in education needs to be rebranded as STEAM, and you put in a little bit of arts in there and your little bit of creativity. So we really are not so much looking for skill, we're also looking for wider experiences. And how are people adapting to that well, do you think? And the ones who do adapt, are they, almost doing better at it? I was reading this book, A Whole New Mind. It's the fact that it's like, it doesn't matter if you're an engineer or an artist, you've got two sides of the brain. Why wouldn't you use both?
That is so true. I believe people are, and especially in the environment that we're in, where everybody's focused on the energy transition, people are realizing that they need to learn as much as they can and use both sets. And then folks I'm talking to from the traditional oil and gas want to learn more about how do they get into renewables and what skills, and it's often those soft skills, right, that are helping them with the transition into the renewable or solar utility or even other industries. Yep.
I might pick up on what you said there. You mentioned the word soft skills. Sometimes I think they're essential skills.
There you go.
Maybe they're going through a transformation as well in terms of reforming. One of the other panels we talked about, also talked about how, communication broke down a little bit, during the pandemic, and the fact that the language people use, how they communicate, that needs to be considered and needs to be different. And really, people want to get back and they want to talk to each other, I think, as well. That's really important.
Yeah, and I think when we say communications, we also, especially being remote, you don't always pick up on the body language that you're missing out from seeing someone in person. And if you think about just from an employee experience, being able to be there or be in front of their manager or boss or teams for project it's quite challenging to have that same visibility, especially for women who we tend to not emphasize our talents, right, within organizations. And so it's difficult to be able to maintain that level of performance visibility that's needed to help prepare you for promotions. And so this also goes back to knowing ourselves and knowing how we need to show up. And again, I'm an introvert versus an extrovert. So I'm not going to be the loudest one in the room. So think about me as we're virtual. My manager may not always realize what I'm contributing because I'm not going to be the loudest one in the room that's always speaking. And so leaders also need to understand how to manage the diverse personalities and perspectives of their workforce. And there's a book called Quiet by Susan Cain that talks about not only, me, how just really help validate some of the things I know about myself with introversion, but it's also for leaders to understand how to manage introverts as well. And so that is another kind of dynamic for leaders to think about. It's not just straight performance anymore. It's work experience, it's inclusion. It's all these other things as well.
And I do think, that there's been a shift and everybody is talking about it, and so many companies have processes in place that help people as well, so it makes a big difference, I think, to where companies have decided on this as a goal. It is about diversity, inclusion, equity is about all of that, and they're going to learn how to do it, and they're also going to bring experts in to help work with their people. So I think that also, that learning process, the fact that we don't have to do things the way we did them because we are looking, I think, for different outcomes. I think that's very, very important. Would you agree with that?
I would, and it's really has turned things upside down for us, right? In the way that we think about it, and it's important that leaders evolve and managers. I say people managers because anybody that are leading people should be evolving in this way to really take care of their workforce and to think about, again, not just them in their quote unquote 8 to 5 realm, but who they are as individual that can bring the best out of them to be able to perform, for the organization. And it creates, at least for me, the better that you take care of your employees, obviously the better the organization is going to perform, but it also helps with retention as well, because employees are going to want to continue to show up and be loyal and be able to contribute to the organization. So all of that matters.
So you're definitely a proponent of the carrot, not the stick. Somebody was earlier looking at the disc method that we were all so familiar with, and that the D in it, that very direct way of working, and that's probably no longer going to be part and parcel of the future. But it's also making sure that people are both, the employee also has a responsibility, to show up, to be ready for work, to be able to do their job. It's tough to sometimes find the language, I think, to tell somebody they're not doing a good job, because nowadays I think people are saying, you can't tell me I'm not doing a good job, because it's not politically correct anymore.
So I'm going to say two things. So to the DIS comment, I think it's important that especially as leaders, that we learn how to flex amongst the quadrants, right? And so that we may be dominant in the D category, but how can we leverage the I, S, and C? And so leaders are going to have to really expand the way that they lead to be able to do that. And then right on the flip side, employees, the employees have a responsibility in this as well. And so when we talk about flexible working, I think one of the things and you think about communication is really defining what does that flexible work mean? Right. And so, and is it what's flexible for me might not be flexible for you. And so defining the flexibility, so keeping that lines of communication open, being transparent. And then also if you're starting a new job or looking for a job, being upfront about the things that are important for you as an employee and an employer, so that it just starts off the working relationship in the right way.
Right, and people can really, put their expectations in place, or, make the judgments before they put the expectations in place and know what they can get, so they make a choice on that. But talk to me about some of your own practices. And I keep, you remind us you're an introvert, but I love your energy. And again, what do you do when the going gets tough? Because sometimes, and I think we all experience it, we look at perhaps, mindfulness and gratefulness, and how do we just pull back a little bit and think about where are we, and maybe take that breath before we move on to the next.
So, some practical tips for me, one is planning the time that I need. So just like I plan the events and the meetings and activities, I also book my calendar for the time that I might need to recharge. And I treat that as just as important as anything else, because it's for myself. I've gotten okay with saying no, or not now, or maybe later, and really constantly prioritizing what's important versus, maybe what's urgent. And trying to eliminate those firefights as much as I can. But I think it's important that we, obviously there's some things that you have got to attend, and if that's the case, you have to show up as your best, so you plan the time in between. The other thing I like to do is just practice gratefulness. Find 3 things, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed, just take a break and find 3 things that I'm grateful for, and it just almost instantly resets my mood and my energy.
But when we look at this and, we throw this concept out to the energy sector, this is a very conservative industry still. And we're also looking at a time where there are probably so many different mindsets in terms of who's working in this industry right now. We have people at retirement age who came through a very, very, different environment. They were brought up differently. They had different education systems. They have different expectations. We've got the millennials. We've got everybody working almost, at the moment. So how do you actually bring people on board, particularly if there's any resistance to this?
It's a challenge. We're absolutely in a multi-generational workforce. And I think one of the ways we do that is really learning more about each other. And I don't know if you've heard about reverse mentoring is a great opportunity to do that. So not only should the young professionals get mentored by those with more experience, but those with more experience should get some insights from those young professionals, because the perspective is just different. So how do we learn more about each other so that we can coexist in this workforce, all for the greater good? And I think the other thing is just being open, right? Being open-minded and sharing perspectives, sharing experiences is also going to be important for us.
But do you think, and can we foresee, maybe some Zen, maybe yoga classes going on, and on the sort of in the fabrication yards. And, do you think the industry is ready for that shift? And have you come across any companies that maybe are looking at something new and different?
Well, it's interesting. So maybe 4 years ago, it was kind of a big deal that, you want to create these fun workplaces. And there were a few organizations, and I'm aware of, that like put pool tables in, and, and thought they were making the workplace culture shift. But that is not what, it's one component I guess you can use, but that's not really what's going to shift minds and behaviors, right? To really create this really great culture within organizations. It's really about driving inclusion through curiosity, right? Through culture awareness, through courage to say the things that that maybe other people won't say, to really move us and advance us in DEI. I mean, it's all of these other things in how we show up in our behaviors versus some of the fun things that some of the companies thought they could do. I mean, I think it's great to be able to do that. Maybe think about how we use ERGs even today. A lot of them are leveraged to create that culture and social aspect and networking within the organizations, but they're evolving to really focus on business outcomes and business objectives as well. And so I think there's no right or wrong answer, but you do have to include, you have to go with the change in behavior as well.
Yeah, and I think it does change, and everybody is advocating for that change. So the industry, I think, has to come on board and deliver that change without a doubt. You talked a little bit about, the fact that you plan your day, you plan your private time, you plan your downtime, so to speak. Do you think sometimes maybe we're all a little bit cynical about the need for that planning and just the great advantage that it is, because we will always make our meetings, we will always get them, and if they're in the diary, it always happens. So I like that concept of making sure that there's other time that it's in the diary, so it's almost our mindset, and that other people we work with sometimes can see that diary, so you're not always available.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? It's okay, which, seems maybe not the right thing, but it's okay to not always be available, right? And so we have to really, take our mindfulness and take our energy and how we show up as important, to make it as important as everything else, and how we're showing up for others.
Indeed, yeah, I do think it's something I need to maybe do myself. Try it a little more. Talk to me about values, and talk to me about how you live your values in terms of how you live your professional life. How do you make sure that your values are aligned with who you're working with? And again, maybe for all of the people who are out there looking for jobs perhaps at the moment and getting ready for their career, how important it is to think about this.
I think it's very important. And early in my career, I honestly, to be frank, I didn't really think about it. I wanted a job, right, that was steady for me and my family early on. But now, just with some reflection and thinking about, the future, it's important that when I get up every morning and get dressed, that the work that I do aligns with my values. And so that means that if I'm looking for a role or organization, then I'm going to be doing my own research to be able to find out if they are, if that company has the same values as I do, that I really can work and contribute to them. And I think, again, it just helps us show up more authentically at work when that happens as well. And then if you don't, you'll find yourself, and I've experienced this, really off balance, where you're kind of forcing yourself into a work environment that doesn't align with who you are, and then you're not able to contribute as well as if you were.
Yeah, and that is no benefit to anybody. A question that just came in here too, asking what advice would you give to companies who are trying to manage, I think, this concept of, a time when employees are, overwhelmed and they're balancing, looking at burnout and stress. There's a lot of work to be done, and you as the manager needs to come in and kind of manage that and make sure, yes, that the work gets done, but that people don't feel over pressured. And, negative returns will kick in if people get too pressured and if they work too long. So what do you do to find that balance for your employees? How do you have that discussion to make sure we all work towards, productivity and getting things done, but at the same time, making sure that people feel that they're valued within there?
I think so. A couple of things. One is prioritization. So we should prioritize our life. We should prioritize our work. And so again, and it's okay to ask and really constantly think about what's urgent, what's important. And so that the workload, as much as possible, can be balanced throughout the days and with the workforce that you have. And then secondly, I would say just, again, show as much appreciation and openness to, and with a little bit of vulnerability, I will say, to your employees, right, and empathy, right? Most of us have been there. We work on both, kind of burn both ends of the candlestick, right? And so how do we really show appreciation through authentic thanking of the employees and showing their appreciation, and also finding ways to give them the time off. Again, planning, how can we give them the time off that they need to really refresh so that we won't lose anybody because they're burnt out.
Now, we look at the workforce of the future. It's going to be very different than the workforce of the past. People don't come knocking on your door looking for a job for life anymore. But you'd like them to maybe, at least for the life of their career, or sometimes for a lot of it. How do you encourage companies, just as a closing comment here on this session, to really embrace the employees that are out there, the available workforce, to make it attractive, to bring them in and really to help them build a career that's going to grow, and that they're going to be able to grow with the company, and that everybody grows together?
Yeah, I think my philosophy is that we should lead with people first, right? So if the people are taken care of, then your business is going to grow. So how are you creating an environment where they feel like they can give themselves authentically and feel valued, respected, and appreciated? And then also from a learning and development, what opportunities are we giving them to be able to learn, to develop, to keep them really intrigued and curious about how they contribute to the organization?
Yeah, I think that's so important, that concept of lifelong learning in a way, and the fact that if they work with one organization, they still learn, and that they can evolve. It's not suddenly from, university to just work. I mean, there's so much there. And I suppose it is that full feeling of inclusiveness, as you talk about before. So a lot to be done. And thank you for, been so good to share your experience with us and give us some good ideas in terms of what we can all do to actually make sure that we engage with our employees, and that we can all have a fuller, better work life, and hopefully a calmer, more enjoyable personal life, just because it's all part and parcel, and we have to bring it together. Thank you.
It's all one. Thank you.
It is really. Shanta Eaden there, thank you so much, the CEO of Ally Energy. It was great to have time to talk to you, and I really appreciate it.